The power of the Daleks, despite your personal opinions on the actual story, is incredibly important in the history of Doctor Who. It is our first ever post-regeneration story, and the future of the show rested on the shoulders of Patrick Troughton.
In the tracking room. Something about this old body of mine is wearing a bit thin.
Sadly, this episode was wiped from the archive, and all that remains is the original audio recordings, telesnaps, and some surviving clips. Some of these clips come from an 8mm film home camera, which were recorded by an unknown Australian fan. If you notice the clip is in low quality and has a bad frame rate, it means it's an 8mm clip.
What are we going to do? It is the Doctor, I know it is.
The 2D animation in the opening scene in the TARDIS seems to use different character models compared to the later scenes, and you can tell as the scene goes on, the animation improves slightly. This is strange because it's arguably the most important moment, Patrick Troughton's first scene.
Hi, Ben. Now, are you two coming or are you not?
The surface of the planet Vulcan really shows off the brilliant design of the original set, with its beautiful rock formations, and it's just been expanded to have a higher production value. It's clear from this early on the production is incredibly faithful to the telesnaps and the original design. This was the first Doctor Who missing episode animation that was animated in 16:9 rather than 4:3.
How do you feel?
A colorized version also exists. The original intention wasn't to colorize this story. Allegedly, this was BBC America's idea, and a team was hired to apply colour over the black and white animation. I feel as if the colour version of this animation is incredibly jarring, due to the shading not translating to colour, and also not being accurate to the original colours that were in the production, unlike the Macra Terror, where the colour version was intended from the very beginning. This was also the first missing serial to be animated in its entirety, with no surviving episodes. Previous releases relied on the 2 or less rule, e.g., The Invasion had episodes 1 and 4 missing from the archive, therefore, it was cheaper to animate only 2.
What's he up to now?
Then we're not going to let him out of our sight.
In the past, the idea of 6 individual episodes being animated never would have happened. The cliffhanger segment of episode 1 exists as a 16mm recording that is sourced from its original trailer. This trailer was on the end of a film recording of Beyond the Freeze, What Then?, an unrelated program. It was discovered in 2003. I think one of the triumphs of this animation is the lighting. Especially looking at the telesnaps, the lighting really sets the mood of the piece and does a lot to cover things up. In the surviving footage, when it cuts to Ben and Polly, it looks as if the Dalek capsule's door is shut, whereas in the animation, it's open. This could be just the side of the ship, it's hard to tell in such low quality.
Again. God.
The surviving footage has really been paid attention to in this animation, and you can tell how accurate it is when it's side by side. The Power of the Daleks episode 1 had an audience appreciation index of 43, which is incredibly low. This low rating wasn't entirely uncommon for Doctor Who. One of the lowest scores of 30 was given to the OK Corral, the 4th episode of The Gunfighters, earlier that year. I think it's interesting how difficult it was for an audience to accept a new Doctor, and the same thing is happening now almost 50 years later, and happens every time there is a new actor to take the lead role, but more on that later.
His apologies, Examiner. He can't see. Not even you, Examiner, is allowed into his room.
Edward Kelsey, who plays Resno, was in The Romans and returned in Creature from the Pit. The Power of the Daleks showed a different side to the Daleks that we hadn't really seen previous, disguising their intentions and creeping in the shadows. The Doctor's frustration at their lies makes for some really chilling television. I feel as if David Whittaker, the writer, gave the Daleks a whole new personality that never occurred to Terry Nation. The idea of the Doctor's recorder was allegedly Patrick Troughton's idea due to the fact he learnt how to play it 6 years prior.
But we've got to defend.
The ending moments of this serial has a Dalek chant, "I am your servant," which was famously reused in Victory of the Daleks, but the line was changed to "I am your soldier." Nick Briggs, the voice of the Daleks, said he added a pause between the S and the "olger" in order to pay tribute to the original line. There are many parallels between Power of the Daleks and Victory of the Daleks. Which story is more successful is up to you to decide.
It destroys them.
Episode 3 sadly has no surviving clips, but we do have a full set of telesnaps. Bernard Archard, who plays Bragan, returned to Doctor Who in Pyramids of Mars as Marcus Scarman. Peter Bathurst, who plays Hensel, returned in Claws of Axos as Horatio Chin. In August 2016, 2 minutes of this Power of the Daleks animation was leaked onto YouTube. Speculation went wild over what it was, if it was an official or fan-made production. There had been a number of rumours about this being an official animation for a few months before this, and people believed this leak was essentially a confirmation. The pillows being thrown was originally the Doctor pulling the mattress from the frame of the bed. Pillows are a bit easier to animate though. In September, the BBC officially announced it to be released in November, to celebrate its 50th anniversary of its original broadcast in the UK. Some of the music was taken from the Daleks and the Daleks Master Plan. This story describes the Doctor's regeneration as a renewal and is part of the TARDIS. It almost gives the idea that the second Doctor is actually a younger version of William Hartnell's Doctor, which would be incredibly strange since the two actors approached the role in different ways. It wasn't until the John Pertwee era where they first mentioned the word regeneration, and that version of the mythos stuck. This story was first released as a narrated audio, voiced by Tom Baker, in character as the Doctor. This was released in 1993. Ironically enough, the master tapes of Tom Baker's narration was wiped. Also ironically, I have lost my Blu-ray copy of this release. That was a joke. In the words of Jeb Bush, please clap. In 2003, a new release of this audio narration was produced, narrated by Annika Wills. This audio narration can be viewed on the home media release in the Telesnap reconstruction. An official Telesnap reconstruction was released in 2005 also. There's so many releases, I feel like I'm talking about Sharda. One of my favourite things to do is to look at reviews of episodes from the time they were broadcast. In 1966, in Radio Times, one disgruntled viewer said, "What have you done to BBC One's Doctor Who? Of all the stupid nonsense! Why turn a wonderful series into what looked like Coco the Clown? I think you will find thousands of children will not be watching Doctor Who, which up to now has been the tops." This letter was from Mrs. Estelle Hawken from Cornwall. Funnily enough, the show was incredibly successful. Another audience member said, "Given sensible scripts, the program could possibly emerge as one of the real successes of television science fiction." Oof, they're not going to enjoy the underwater menace. It's interesting how times haven't changed too much. Anytime a new Doctor Who comes in, people will be upset. Now Patrick Troughton is regarded by fans as one of the best. I'm referring to any Doctor casting, by the way, and I love the underwater menace, so don't get too angry in the comments, okay?
She's out of her mind.
In the draft scripts, there were references to the Doctor having regenerated several times previous, and was to look at items of his previous incarnations. This idea was reused in The Brain of Morbius, and fans decided to ignore that. There were going to be references to Susan, his granddaughter also, and references to the fact that he forgot where he left her. Interestingly enough, there was to be a reference to the Daleks destroying his home world, an idea that was later used by Russell T Davies with the concept of the Time War. The destruction of the Doctor's homeworld by Daleks was a concept in many unfinished productions, but that's a story for another day. The Daleks on the conveyor belt is from the program Tomorrow's World and was discovered in 2005. The 16mm footage of a Dalek entering the doorway was located in 1995 as part of a film insert for the program Perspective. Episode 5 has the highest appreciation figure of this serial, which was a measly 48. The interior of the Dalek capsule is slightly larger than the original production and adds a real sense of scale. These artistic additions are a causing point of argument between fans. Personally, it doesn't offend me. If I wanted the closest to accuracy, I'd watch a loose cannon reconstruction. This clip was found in Perspective also.
To teach these human beings the law of the Daleks.
An often used quote from William Hartnell said, "There's only one man in England who can take over, and that's Patrick Troughton." Many have said that he recommended the role to be taken over by Patrick, and others, such as Michael Craze in his Mythmakers interview, denies this, finding it difficult to believe. It makes you question if it was a produced line by the producers. Either way, during the regeneration scene, they were in the same room together. It's a little bit magical thinking of the two actors working side by side, having a discussion about the future and the past of the show. When this serial was sold internationally, it was offered to Australia in March 1967 and withdrawn from sale only a few weeks after, due to the belief that you couldn't watch The Power of the Daleks without watching The 10th Planet. In 1969, they began selling Power again, which New Zealand bought. New Zealand sent their copy to Singapore in 1972. Interestingly enough, all the Second Doctor stories were screened in Singapore, starting with the Highlanders, because they didn't have access to Power at that point. Therefore, when they did get access, they had to screen Power of the Daleks last. Australia returned their copy to the BBC, and Singapore's fate is unknown. Whew, haven't said that in a while. I think the best part of these animations compared to the reconstructions is where there are scenes of just action. Watching a scrolling black bar of text makes it difficult to really follow what's going on. This is a personal preference though.
Man who could have saved us. Now I'm declaring martial law. Good, do you think that will do against the Daleks?
The final clip is from Wicker's World, and was also on Blue Peter. The Blue Peter version was 2 seconds shorter. Perspectives also contain this clip also, and shorter still. It is clear that the Daleks in the background are cardboard cutouts, and I'm sure there are some loyalists out there who will be upset that they were turned into 3D models. I forgot how long this final clip was, it just keeps going. Cruelly, episode 6 was recorded on 35mm film, which means we could have a true HD release if the original film really existed. Usually, Doctor Who was recorded on videotape. The only story of the classic series filmed completely on film was Spearhead from Space and the television film starring Paul McGann. This is why Spearhead from Space is in true HD on Blu-ray, for it was shot on 16mm film. The Paul McGann film Blu-ray is not true HD, due to the original film prints being difficult to obtain. If they were obtained, it would be still a costly effort to recreate the CGI, which was always in standard definition. The reason we only have a videotape master copy is because it was edited on videotape, and the film prints were digitized. It was a different time. Due to this digitization, and the insistence of recording on videotape, a lot of Doctor Who will always look cheaper. Television was never meant to be screened on televisions as large as they are today, and videotape was cheap in comparison to film. Film was only used if it made the editing process easier. This is a big problem when it comes to modern Blu-ray remasters of standard definition footage. The Doctor Who team have done an amazing job, but comparing the video quality to something like the Star Trek or Twilight Zone remasters is depressing. The Americans were smart enough to keep the original film prints and shoot on film. Doctor Who fans are less fortunate, sadly. The final episode has so many action sequences, it makes sense it was shot on film. If you shoot on film, it's easier to make edits compared to videotape back in the day. It's nice to have this animated due to the amount of action. The Dalek exploding footage was discovered in 1993 on the program Tom Tom. It's interesting looking back on the Power of the Daleks animation and thinking about what could have been if we had the original prints. If you love the story or hate the story, you can't deny the fact that it's an important serial in Doctor Who history. Hopefully one day it'll be found. Which animated episode would you like me to discuss next? Don't forget to follow me on Twitter or subscribe to my YouTube channel for more Doctor Who content.